You see, this is my life. It always will be. There's nothing else. Just us. And the cameras. And those wonderful people out there in the dark.
Well, hello. Sorry. Oh, let's take two. Hi there. Do you like that?
No.
I have no idea how to start this. How about like, hey there, everyone. Hey. Hi.
Hey there, Hank.
Hey now. Well, welcome to another episode of Out There in the Dark. I'm Azed, a kind of weird mix of like semi-professional producer and tinkerer with cinema and films and stuff like that.
And I'm Tom, and I am
And that's it. I'm Tom.
I'm Tom.
That's right.
That's it.
Tom's got the important job. Anyway,
It's not true.
how you doing, Tom?
I'm good. How are you?
Pretty good.
Great.
You know, I'm still me. Like, you know, how good can I be?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that
with you there.
didn't sound sincere. Anyway, I have a question for you, Tom.
Yes, Azed.
So, is it possible to actually separate the art from the artist? This is a question I see coming back a lot, coming around all the time because of so many things that are canceled. And we today are going to be talking about movies that are canceled. So I'd really like to know what you think. Is that even a possible thing?
Well, I think that this conversation is going to answer that question, or at least try to answer that question. I think it's very difficult, but I think it's possible. And I think it depends on the person and the frame of mind, because ultimately the art is separate from the artist, but one informs the other, and in a huge degree. And I think as a spectator and as an audience member, it is to separate the art from the artist, it has to be a very conscious decision, and one that's not to be taken lightly.
Yeah. It's like almost like one of those Escher drawings for me. It goes round and it never really ends, right?
It doesn't.
But I don't know. I kind of feel like, this idea that that you can, if you know something about the artist, right? And they're not good people sometimes. Okay, so they do shitty things. How does that invalidate the work? I'm not sure that I understand that. Like, you only liked like Moby Dick when you didn't know that Melville was like a trans man. You know what I mean? Like, or something like that. Like, that doesn't make any sense to me.
No, I don't think it makes any sense either.
Yeah.
And I think that's what we're going to talk about, is how does so-called, and it's very so-called cancel culture affect the way that we consume media, the way we watch films, and do films that are by, bad people, deserve to have an audience. And you can, of course, extend that to music and visual arts and anything else.
Right.
And I think it's a conversation that's been happening for many, many years, and it's going to keep happening.
Right.
And I think we have to do it. We have to talk about it smartly and openly, and it's going to be a provocative episode, and hopefully a very interesting one.
Well, I don't know what I think about what you said. It triggered me.
You are going to be triggered.
I'm leaving. No. I totally hear you. I find this to be one of those things that is so contradictory, right? Like, there are some artists out there who are obviously terrible people, and they don't get canceled, right? And so you're like, well, why not this? Like, we were just talking about Brian De Palma, right? We were talking about Dress to Kill, right? It's like, I love Dress to Kill and I love Brian De Palma, but why hasn't even one of his movies been canceled, considering the kind of the metrics that we use for that kind of thing now? It's like every one of his movies could be like the most sexist thing ever, right? If you choose to look at it that way. I don't. Like, the opening of Carrie, right?
Right.
All naked teenage girls in a shower, right? Now you could say, well, that's obviously, exploitative, sexist, whatever. But he's making a point, right, that is implicating you, the viewer, because it's all about you want to voyeuristically look at naked teenage girls in a shower, and you feel shitty about it because you're gross. And and then you get mad at Brian De Palma for doing it, right? And you say, oh no, that's not what he was doing. He was actually just he's the greaseball, and he's just putting his greaseball fantasies on screen.
I recently rewatched Carrie because I showed it to my son, who was getting into horror films. He loved it. He loved Carrie, and I think to your point I think you just answered your own question, which is why hasn't Carrie been canceled or other Brian De Palma films? And I also recently saw Sisters for the first time.
Oh, so good!
Yeah,
I love that movie.
That was something else.
Yeah.
But I think Carrie is complicated because I don't think the opening sequence is designed or even comes across as exploitive. It's done in such a way where it's in slow motion, it's lingering on the bodies, the music is very lilting, but there's something very menacing about all of it.
So you're saying there's something. I think we're saying the same thing in a different way, but there's something so deliberate in the filmmaking. Yeah. It points to its own exploitative quality. Right. That's what I meant.
Which De Palma would do to the nth degree in the opening scene of Blowout. So in Blowout, it opens with like a horror movie, where some faceless killer is stalking the dorm rooms. It's the exact same opening as Black Christmas.
Right.
And then when she screams, then it goes. You find out that it's just a shitty horror movie. They're sound mixing with John Travolta. And
you can't find a perfect scream in that movie. That's the kind of through line.
Not until the end.
Spoiler alert! Oh my god.
Sorry, but yeah, I think when you have a filmmaker that intelligence, it's harder to cancel.
Yeah, maybe. I wouldn't give the.
I don't know anything about De Palma's personal life. Like, is he?
I don't think I'm sure
never
if
done
you
anything.
dig
Has he done anything bad?
Come on,
I have no idea.
Have you seen De Palma? He's like, he looks like he's like fucking everything that moves. Not now, maybe, but like, It was
the 70s.
It was the 70s. Everybody was doing that, right? So anyway.
But to your point, I mean, you hear stories about like Michael Curtiz, Otto Preminger. These are people who are known for being verbally and emotionally abusive on set every single day.
That's a cliche of the director, right? That you're this like narcissistic, autocratic, and
no one's canceled Laura, no one's canceled Anatomy of a Murder, nobody's canceled Casablanca.
Yeah, exactly. So that's what I mean. It's like the Chris Rock special we were talking about, selective outrage, right?
Right.
And then it's the selection. It's like, how are things being selected? That's very interesting to me, right? And we were talking about this when we were talking about this episode, that there have been some movies that have been sort of canceled by the quote woke mob or whatever, right? And in a lot of the instances, like the one we were talking about, which was Birth of a Nation, in those instances, I kind of understand a little bit more.
You should specify which Birth of a Nation.
Birth of a Nation by, what's his name? Parker.
Nate Parker.
Nate Parker, yeah, exactly. So he was this kind of like young black filmmaker who did this, what's the biography of?
Nat
Turner, exactly. So, and he called it The Birth of a Nation, and it's like, obviously, it's like the update, so people, it's almost as if he wanted to make a movie so that when people talked about Birth of a Nation, they would think of his movie first rather than Griffith, right? Anyway, I haven't seen the movie. I heard it's pretty good, but not nothing.
I've seen it. I saw it at TIFF the year. I thought it was pretty good.
Pretty good. It didn't blow your mind.
It did not blow my mind because it was kind of histrionic filmmaking. It was not bravura filmmaking by any stretch.
Right.
Fascinating story. the Nat Turner story probably deserves to have a very good film made about him.
Right.
This was not it.
Right.
Although I remember one of the better, what I thought was the best performance in the entire film was by an actor who was canceled completely different reasons, was Armie Hammer, who played the
I didn't know Armie Hammer was canceled.
You didn't know
No.
You don't know anything about this?
Oh, you see, this is the other thing. It's hard to keep up. I don't know. There's so many
It's a good point. Well, we won't talk about Armie Hammer unless we do it in the follow-up episode, because my esteemed colleague doesn't know the crazy shit he's been up to.
We'll save that part for the Patreon group.
Visit our website for more added content. But anyway, so Nate Parker's The Birth of a Nation was an okay film, but it did get quite a lot of attention when it premiered at festivals as being a really strong film by a new African-American filmmaker and actor. A lot of attention, very good initial reviews, and then, of course, it came out that Parker and the co-screenwriter of the film had been accused of rape. When they were in film school together, or in university or college. I don't know all the details, except that he was not found guilty, but the screenwriter was. But then it was overturned on appeal.
Right.
And also that after the accusations were made, that Parker and the screenwriter were harassing the alleged victim repeatedly. And that many years later, tragically, she ended her life.
Right. Although I think I read an article that said they were not tying her suicide only to that.
No.
I think she had some other
issues,
but yes, that's basically the story. So that came out, and then the movie.
And so the movie kind of came and went. I mean, it overshadowed the campaign.
There was a campaign to cancel it, right? Like,
I think the studio. I think it might have been Fox. I can't remember. Anyway, they kind of dumped the film. They did not give it the publicity attention that they originally were planning to, and Nate Parker's career was over. Yeah.
So, in that instance, to a certain extent, I understand it a little bit more, only because it's like he's new. We don't know who this... It's almost like, I don't know who this guy is. He made a movie, but then they're saying he also raped somebody. It's like, maybe that's true, maybe it's not. Maybe it's in between, right? It's like, it's like, I have nothing invested in this person at all. But when it happens to somebody who you really, admire as an artist, right? Mm-hmm. You've already invested so much of... I mean, it could be, think about, I don't know, who's one of your favorite filmmakers? Let's say... Hitchcock, right?
There's a great example right there.
And it's like
Hitchcock. Who did do all those things?
He did all those things also, but it's like, what if there was a true campaign right now that said we have to never show Hitchcock movies again? You know what I mean? And we can't show them on TV. You can buy them, I guess, and watch them, but it's like, you can't tell anybody that you watched them. Can't go to a party and say I just finished watching Vertigo for the 100th time.
I don't think anybody anywhere has managed to cancel an entire filmmakers, I mean, if I wanted to watch a film by D.W. Griffith or Leni Riefenstahl, that would not be difficult. I could certainly find them at a video store.
Yeah, it would be.
On streaming.
But I mean, it's just a question of that there's a big sweeping light, right? And it's but it's going to come for you at some point, right? It's going to come for all of us. This is the problem with this kind of thinking, in a sense. It's like there's no stopping this, right?
Well, I think there's no stopping it too, in the sense of where do you draw the line? I mean. Everybody we know has done. Nobody is. I don't know anybody who's perfect. People like Kevin Spacey and Harvey Weinstein and these horrible rapists and violent offenders, who deserve to be rotting in jail and deserve to not get the chance to make another film, as far as I'm concerned.
Right.
Where's the slope where we then say, okay, well, you're a criminal.
Right.
Are we going to say, if you engage in criminal behavior, you shouldn't make a film again? Well, how many? I mean, you've got financial crimes, tax evasion. You've got, and I'm not equating one to the other, Or,
When a system has no brakes on it at all, right? It's like, well, this is the thing that could just end culture completely, right? Like, if this keeps going, like, it's just outrage,
I don't
and it's
think
like
anything's going to end.
no, I know, I'm not saying it is, but it's the kind of thinking that's very popular, right? And let's think about it this way: from people like my age, and somewhat your age, you're younger than me, but we think about we think about things in a different way, like people who were like doing criminal things on a low level, whatever. It wouldn't have bothered us at all if they were like, like if they were like a punk band or something, right? So,
Right.
We wouldn't have that sense of ethics, that morality, where we were like, oh, Captain Beefheart, tried to like pick up a girl in a restaurant. It's like, who cares, right? But
It's, yeah. I mean, in the 1930s, John Huston was an alcoholic.
Yeah.
And he drove drunk and he killed somebody.
Yeah.
He also drove drunk a separate time and put his girlfriend's head through the windshield. And he went into depression, left Hollywood, and moved to France. I think he was painting in Paris. And when he finally came back to Hollywood, he decided he would never do anything like that again. He continued being a hard drinker, but he never again lost control in that way.
Right.
And that was all before The Maltese Falcon came out, which was his first film. These are all horrible things that he did.
Yeah.
And there's no excuse for them.
But you have to give the chance to redeem.
But if we can't, should we have said, well, you stay out of this town and you're done?
You're done. Yeah.
This is one of the greatest filmmakers in film history, and who also turned out to be somebody who was greatly admired and loved by many, many.
Yeah. No, I think that's true. Like, it just gets to this whole thing. I mean, I think today we're gonna talk about a couple of movies, right? Like, I really want to talk about Blonde, and that's the one that bothers me the most out of all of them. So I'm interested to take some of what we're talking about and put it towards Blonde, and then I think you wanted to talk kind of more about. You've seen the Louis C.K. one, right?
Yeah, there's a couple of other ones I'd like to talk about.
Yeah.
I think Louis C.K.'s film "I Love You, Daddy" is an interesting one.
Yeah,
because
it never even got released.
It's a great example of separating the art from the artist. Because in the case of this film, how do you do that? He's the writer, director, star, and the themes of it echo through much of, I think, Louis C.K.'s body of work,
right?
And which also echo his behavior in a very twisted way.
See, like, that's interesting because I know it's sort of like a send up of Manhattan, or not a send up, but a kind of direct. He stole basically, like, it's like it looks like Manhattan, like it's got the same exact sort of patina to it or whatever, and it's Manhattan
if Louis C.K. was Muriel Hemingway's father.
Right.
That's the movie.
That's interesting. Oh, I never thought of it that way because I haven't seen it, but whatever. But the thing is, like, when the original Manhattan, like, came out, everybody loved it. It's like considered like his classic work. Even I mean, Annie Hall's maybe his funniest work, whatever, and that one's considered his mature.
Well, that's the line
work.
That's the line between comedy Allen and dramatic Allen.
Yeah,
Manhattan.
And it's perfectly balanced because there's some really funny moments in Manhattan, right? But the thing is, it's so close to his real life, the storyline, right? And I that doesn't bother me because I don't know Woody Allen, and he's not a personal friend of mine. I'm just thinking that adds another layer to this work, that I know something that happened to him in his real life, or this person's. To me, it's all part of the narrative because I don't know him, and he's just a figure, and his life becomes kind of like another part of a story, and so. To me, I think it enhances in many ways his work. Not that of course, nobody in the world condones doing yucky, immoral things, right? But, the truth is we do, right? So, what are you going to do about that? Just like just judging it like you're a bad guy, so I don't like you, like, or I need to stay away from you. You're a monster. It's so much. There's so much denial in it, as if you're not a monster too, right?
Or as I think when you call somebody a monster, it's denying them that they are human beings, and it's denying an understanding of them. So,
it's that, but also there is a monstrous side to us all.
To us
right?
all.
You put yourself in the right situation at the wrong time. You don't know what you're capable of doing.
There's a great TV. I use this example talking about people like Harvey Weinstein and Kevin Spacey with somebody, I forget when. But there's a TV show that I really, really like called Mindhunter. And in Mindhunter
is the
it's the John Douglas adaptation about the beginnings of the FBI Behavioral Sciences Unit
with Hannibal Lecter, right? Mindhunter. Oh, it's
the TV show by David Fincher.
I loved it. Yeah, I loved it. Yeah, nobody else liked it but you and me.
So in Mindhunter, the main character, who's based on John Douglas, the FBI profiler, wants to start the Behavioral Sciences Unit to try to understand serial killers and to try to figure out how they became the way they were.
This was like in the 70s, right?
This is like in the 70s. Yeah. And his partner doesn't want to. And the FBI brass and his partner all were like, why do you want to talk to these people? We've already got them in jail. He goes, well, we need to understand why they do the things they do. Well, they're just psychotics. Why do you want to talk to them?
Yeah.
And I think that's why we have to look at people like, the predators of today and the people who have done these horrible things like Weinstein and Spacey and say they're not monsters. They're human beings, and we need to find out why they acted like this.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I'm saying too. Like, I mean, it's like, of course, people should pay for crimes and all that stuff. But I'm not big on this cruelty angle. Like, where it's like everybody just jump on the guy and be like, I hate him more than you do. It becomes like a kind of hatred Olympics, right? Mm-hmm. And it's like, what's the point of that, right? Like, the only point for me is that the vast majority of us, and I'm putting myself in here too, but I mean, I don't think as much as some people I see, right? But we're in denial, right? We have to be a lot of the time. Yeah. And the thing is, there's a denial of that denial that's happening now. And I think that's why people are, pointing their finger at the other. You're bad, not me. Don't look at me, right?
It's bizarre.
Yeah, and I think that there's reasons for that, but I mean, it's not, we don't want to get into a whole social science class here, but I think it's related to what we're talking about. So let's talk a little bit about Blonde, okay?
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, so this is a movie based on a novel by Joyce Carol Oates. It's called Blonde, but it's about Marilyn Monroe, right? And the book was very well received. Like, it was like one of those critical success books, right? So the book is considered great. And then Andrew Dominic made this version, this movie adaptation of Blonde. I think it was last year it came out, right?
Last year.
And I was like, I hadn't even heard that it was out, and then I started reading about it on Twitter, and it was just this pile-on, and it was just crazy. It was like, oh, I can't, this is the most insulting movie, it's misogynistic, it's this, it's pro-life, it's everything, right? Like, just everything you could think of,
The pro-life thing still kills me.
Oh, I read so many, like this is a total, anti-abortion movie. That's what its whole point is like, people just really, really, really chose this movie in particular to really hate on. And so then I watched it and I really liked it. Like, I thought it was such a powerful movie. I was saying to you that I saw it a second time and I didn't like it as much because I found like it was just arduous, and it's just an unpleasant place to be for 3 hours, right? But yeah, I was like, but this is some gorgeous filmmaking, some really, really, really intense scenes.
It's audacious filmmaking.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah,
whether you like it or not, it's quite visionary.
There are some scenes from the childhood scenes that are really horrific, right? And part of me thought, and I think this is, I have never read this anywhere, but I wonder what you think. For me, what clicked for me and what made it a better film, like much better film than people were saying it was that I think he was trying to do a horror film as a biopic like that, right? And there are horror imagery. There's a lot of horror imagery in it, right? And I think even that going into her womb and all that stuff, I don't think it's about misogyny at all or anything like that. I think it's about kind of creeping you out, right? Like he's almost doing a Cronenberg moment there, you know?
Right.
And because you never, like, you're not thinking about abort, like you're not thinking about that when you're watching it. You're just thinking about how horrific the inner world of this character is.
It's interesting because, of course, Joyce Carol Oates wrote a novel, a fictional novel about another real life figure, and it was called Zombie.
Oh.
And it was about Jeffrey Dahmer.
Oh, I haven't read that.
I haven't read it either.
Oh, that's got to be good. Because she's a bizarre writer. Like, I think she's great, but she's a bizarre person, and yeah, she's a great writer.
But I think the film does definitely have horror movie elements.
Yeah.
There are, the scene where they're driving with the fires when she's a little girl.
I know, it's like hell.
Yeah, it was a descent into hell.
Yeah, really, and that mother, the actress who played the mother, was great.
Yeah.
She was so scary.
Yeah, I didn't like the film quite as much as you did, and I think part of the online vitriol that it suffered from was, as you point out, that it's not an entertaining film to watch.
Yeah,
it is very harrowing. It is rather disjointed. It's not a comfortable, easy narrative. It's not something that you can just. It's a Netflix movie. It was made for Netflix, and when people watch stuff on Netflix, they stick it on while they're doing other things, and it's a casual watch.
Right. It's not background noise.
It's not background noise. Well, most of the stuff that Netflix makes is, but
Oh yeah.
But I mean, it's a challenging film. It's not an easy film.
And do you think that means that people are just, what's the word, too ADD or something to pay attention to something that harrowing, and they just are we getting more and more addicted to the quick, thrill and the fix,
I think so. I think I like to use the word marvelized. I think we're all becoming more marvelized.
Right.
Which is a good good concept in this conversation for me, because I think people look for good guys and bad guys. They look for happy endings and sad endings. And there's no room for nuance, and there's no room for complications.
That's terrible. What a terrible predicament. I mean, what happened, Tom? I don't remember this happening.
What do you think? Do you agree?
I totally agree. I definitely see that happening all the time, right? Like every day, you just see this lack of nuance. And I don't understand what's so fun about life without nuance. Like, I don't get it. What's the payoff here, right? Like, if you don't have nuance in these things,
because it's an escape. They don't want to. People don't want to think.
It's like a form of clinical depression or something. Like nothing has any extra meaning. It's just what it means on the surface, right?
No, total aside here, but as we all know, the big movie out right now is Guardians of the Galaxy Part 3.
Yeah.
And it actually opened with box office numbers lower than any other Marvel movie to open in May. And one of the things I noticed when I was looking online was a lot of people were pissed off that a character drops the F-bomb in the movie.
What?
Yeah, in a Marvel movie. And it was rated PG-13.
Oh, right.
Now, these superhero movies before Marvel used to get PG-13 ratings.
Yeah.
Right? The old X-Men movies with, Ian McKellen and Patrick Stewart.
Yeah.
Those were violent and sexy, and characters were making out, and it was not considered like a movie for little kids. And I think,
Yeah, I think in a way, like, that line has definitely moved.
It's dumbed down a lot.
Yeah, like what we were allowed to watch, at theaters, even with our parents, whatever, like The Exorcist.
Yeah.
Everybody saw The Exorcist when they were a teenager, right? And it's like, nobody was like, "Oh my God, you're watching the..." Like,
everybody was going, "Oh my God, you're watching The Exorcist."
Well,
I was freaking out.
People were scared, but there wasn't a moral panic.
Yes, there was a moral panic.
Well, there was a moral panic. I mean, in those days, a moral panic looked like, 10 people outside the theater?
I've seen docs about The Exorcist. I'm really obsessed with it, and believe me, it was a fucked up scenario when that movie came out. There were like religious groups freaking out. There were picketing. There was
Right.
It's insane.
I'm obsessed with The Exorcist too.
Yeah.
It was the only movie that really scared me, and up until like pretty recently. So.
Oh, I still think it's the scariest movie I've ever seen.
It is. It doesn't scare me like I used to sometimes actually. I would not have seen the movie for like 10 years, and sometimes like I would just, for some reason, remember scenes from the movie, and I couldn't sleep.
No, I like watch The Exorcist every 6 months or so.
Wow. Okay,
And,
I gotta leave.
Yeah, no.
But
anyway, we're off topic.
Yeah.
But
anyway, but yeah. I also
that
say,
was a time of nuance.
Yeah,
you know,
that's what I'm saying. Like we were allowed to kind of have some. Kids want to dip a little bit into the adult world, right? That's how you know. It's like that classic image of the kids on the stairs looking down at the party. The parents are having a party, right?
There were no teenagers complaining about the F word in Guardians of the Galaxy 3.
I know.
It was all parents.
I know, because those parents are...
You somehow think that, this is the worst thing that their kid could possibly hear. It's like, have you been in a schoolyard lately?
Yeah, it's just, but it's all about grievance. It's just like, that's what I'm saying. Like, that's what I'm saying. That spotlight is coming. It's going to hit all of us. Like, this is a thing that when they run out of things to get mad about, they're going to make up things to get mad about, right? So... yeah, anyway, back to Blonde, right? It's fine. Yeah, I thought this is like, if they had marketed this as a horror, a kind of horror genre, I think it would have worked, and maybe people have to start doing that in order to kind of reinvigorate the concept of context, right? So many times I've seen also, like, I'm trying to think, what was it? It was White House Plumbers, right? Have you heard about this show?
Yeah, the TV show about Watergate, yeah.
So, me and Tina watched the first two. We were dying of laughter. We were like at one point we had to stop. Like, it was so funny, right? And then I went online, of course, I looked at stuff, and people completely, like, they were like, well, it's kind of a goofy thing, but it's about Watergate, which is serious. It's like, do you not understand, like, how that kind of thing works? Like, it's still like, it's showing how, like, the idiocy, but it's doing it in that really, really, like, comedy movie kind of way, right? Which makes it even deeper. It's like they really were that ridiculous.
I have to watch this because we watched All the President's Men a few weeks ago.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, and then I saw the commercials for White House Plumbers, and I was like,
this is the opposite of All the
President's Men. No, I know, but I was like intrigued, but not intrigued enough to. I didn't watch it. I haven't watched it.
Well, it's just dropping every week, but you should definitely watch it. But yeah, it's like
MASH, right? The movie MASH. Is this hilarious comedy about Korean War, really the Vietnam War.
Right.
But it takes place in the Korean War, and it was very uncomfortable for a lot of people because of its mix of, laugh out loud,
body humor,
right, and the horrors of battle,
Yeah, but that movie especially, like, it has that same kind of farcical tone, where even the way it's edited and cut, it's like it's not taking itself seriously, right? It's like seeing, like, I know that's Altman's style, but it's like he'll do this thing where he'll cut the scene, and it's like sketch is over, you know what I mean? Like end scene, right? That kind of thing. And so that sets the tone. I think people don't get tone anymore, right? Because the comments I heard about Blonde were like, well, we really object to the fact that you're showing a representation of Marilyn Monroe where she has no agency. And I'm like...
It's the entire point of the movie.
Yeah, and I don't understand why that's a problem. Again, I think people just make this shit up, right? Like, they come up with some reason, but it's because a movie like Blonde points the finger at you because this person that we're basically using and consuming, even after she's been dead for like 50 years, 60 years, right? Mm-hmm. It's like, we did this, right? And, we made this icon, right? And this non-person, and we still do it. But she was riddled with mental health problems, and she was sad, and she was full of pain, and this movie is about that, right?
People don't want to. People don't want to see how the sausage is made.
Exactly. Well put. That is going on your gravestone.
Dig 6 feet to find.
Yeah, and then some sausage links is coming out of the ground. Yeah.
Because everyone has their own relationship with the icons they love, and so people have their own relationships with Marilyn Monroe, and then they watch something like Blonde, and that relationship becomes destroyed, becomes critiqued.
Yeah,
you're implicit in the destruction of an icon because you cannot handle the idea that the icon is not who that person was.
Exactly.
And it's interesting how Elvis avoided that entirely.
The movie Elvis.
Elvis, because it was a much more facile portrayal it was a very standard biopic.
I only saw it once, so I like Elvis. I thought it was actually, I hate that director, but
yeah.
But this was actually probably his best movie.
I agree, but it was fun. This is the thing. Elvis.
It was fun, but
movie.
There was things about it that I would like to actually think about. It did have a strange subtext, with the Colonel and Elvis's neediness and his weakness, right? And he was so the Colonel was so parasitic and so. Psychotic or whatever, right? That he got this person who had all the talent in the world and all the good looks in the world and everything to just be, sort of clinging to his shoulder, to him the whole time, right?
Yeah.
And it's really about that attachment, right? Yeah. That was an interesting. We all knew about it, right? But
we haven't seen that on the screen.
Haven't seen that, and people hated Tom Hanks, but I thought he was good. I thought he was scary.
I hated Tom Hanks.
Yeah, but it's because you know why you say that? Because everybody hates Tom Hanks.
No, I really like Tom Hanks, but I didn't like him in this movie.
I thought he was actually pretty good. But
but Blonde is a whole different thing. Blonde is a much more avant-garde film. It's much more.
It is. And the other thing is, though, I think Blonde is the reason why I feel like everybody's reasons about her not being autonomous and blah 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 and all that, and misogynist, all the stuff people say, is just because the movie is really a critique of celebrity, right? It's all about this thing we do to people. Because it's not just about Marilyn. Marilyn, in the movie, there's a threesome, a polyamorous relationship with Charlie Chaplin's son and who's the other guy's son? Another famous actor's son.
Edward G. Robinson's son.
Right.
So her lovers are Edward G. Robinson's son and Charlie Chaplin's son.
And there's this, it's an extended sequence. It's a good 25, 30
There's a couple of scenes, I think.
No, there's more. There's they show them having this relationship, and then she gets pregnant with Charlie Chaplin's son's baby. It's a lengthy sequence, and it's a really fascinating thing because it's not just about her. Now, as a celebrity, it's also about the pain of the children of iconic kind of stars and how miserable they are, so it's really about how celebrity and this thing that we've been doing as humanity in various different ways since the beginning of time, where we exalt a figure and then we have to sacrifice that figure, right? That's just what we do, right? There's Joseph Campbell could explain it maybe or whatever. There's all kinds of reasons why we have this monomyth, going through our lives, through millennia. And I think what Dominic is getting at in the movie is that this kind of culture, this kind of making an icon, it destroys everybody around them. It's like everybody is destroyed, right? The more bright your star shines, the more destruction it kind of leaves in its wake,
Yeah.
I think that to me is the point of the movie. So I don't even really see that it's about Marilyn Monroe, right?
Right.
And like everybody, I went through a period where I was really interested in Marilyn Monroe, her story and the JFK and and all all the stuff you hear about her, right?
Yeah.
And I read a few books and stuff like that, and she is a fascinating figure, right? And she is nonetheless. I agree that yes, this is not the most complex portrayal of her, right? But again, I think sometimes people don't understand that a filmmaker sometimes has a vision. They want to make a movie about something, right? And I think he was trying to make this movie about the destructiveness of our need to have celebrities.
Yeah, and I don't think people like having their myths destroyed, and I think that's what happened with the negative vitriol around Blonde.
Yeah.
Was people wanted like a standard nice biopic about the great Marilyn Monroe, and it's like there was no way that was
or
going
like
to happen.
like the Bridgerton version of of a Marilyn Monroe. You know, it's like, you know, where you know this Marilyn's played by like a black person or something.
Yeah.
You know, it's like I would be fine with that. That's fine. I think that would be kind of cool.
That'd be kind of cool. Yeah.
But my point is that's not what this guy was doing, right?
No.
And he's an interesting filmmaker, right? Because his previous film to this was
Assassination of Jesse James.
Yeah.
Right.
Which I love that movie.
Great film.
Yeah.
Which also destroys a myth.
Exactly. And it's about the rise of how he becomes a celebrity, right?
Yeah.
Ah, I never even thought of that.
I just thought of that now.
Yeah. And he's an interesting filmmaker because he's not like going out and doing like, you know, Marvel movies or rom-coms in between. He's like he's in the same mold as somebody like Terrence Malick, you know, like he's a little experimental, you know, and he's more focused on some kind of concept, right, rather than the internal worlds of the characters necessarily, right?
Kind of a James Gray kind of.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, I thought that, you know, the Assassination of Jesse James was such a weird and gorgeous film, right?
Mm-hmm.
And this one was similar. This one was darker, obviously.
This was more avant-garde. It played more with tone and feel, you know, differing aspect ratios, black and white versus color.
Yeah,
it was much more disjointed.
It's a gorgeous movie. I have to say, like,
beautifully shot. There's no question.
I feel like about this one the same way I feel about like Rumblefish, right? It's like it's not the greatest movie in the world, right? But it's so beautiful. Like, it's probably one of the most beautiful black and white movies I've ever seen. For me, that's the kind of style I love, right? So, you know, that's something in its favor, is it not? I mean, people really downplay that element of film, and it's like, but that's kind of the whole thing, right?
I think as well. I think people, you know, the internet amplifies everything. So the louder you shout, and the more outrageous your claims, the more you're going to get shared and liked and posted.
Right. What can I get? Whose club can I join today?
So
that's saying something.
I could watch Blonde and go, you know, it's okay, it was fine, and then I can go onto my laptop and go, what a horrible piece of shit! Yeah. Oh my god, I'm so offended. How do they treat Marilyn like this?
So
and then,
I am too. Yeah.
And then I hit post, and then I forgot what I just wrote 2 seconds ago.
Interesting.
Meanwhile, 6 months later, we're still talking about it.
Yeah, I think that's true. I mean, you know, like in a
it's
way,
an echo chamber in there.
Yeah, it's an echo chamber, and it's also something that it sort of teaches you how to use it by your just watching it for a while, right?
Yeah.
Like nobody's saying these are the rules, but it becomes just through osmosis. It becomes clear, like, oh, this is what you're supposed to do here. So when I'm on Twitter, I'm supposed to shit on people. That's that's the rule here, right? Like, because I've seen people try to like say something kind on Twitter, and it's just like, shut the fuck, you know. It's like kindness is just goes there to die, right?
Total aside here. Every time I knew this guy once in person, soft-spoken, very mild-mannered, really gentle guy, and then I started following him on Twitter, and he was just the worst, like attacking people, personal attacks. It was just, I hated this guy, right? Like, you would give an opinion on something and he would say, you're a fucking idiot, you know, like, you know.
Because that's what you're supposed to do.
And then I ran into him in person and I said, look, dude, can I ask you something?
Right.
I said, look, you're a really nice guy and I like talking to you and stuff. But I follow you on Twitter and, oh my God, you're such an asshole on Twitter. Like, why do you talk like that? And you know what he said? He said, because I can.
Oh my God, ew.
Yeah.
That's kind of creepy.
Yeah. This is a guy who has like been married for 20 years. He's an accountant. He had a disabled teenage daughter.
The problem right there.
He was like, you know, but he had all those personality traits. He was very mild mannered, but he was smart, and I like talking to him and stuff. I stopped talking to him.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm going to go out on a limb here. I think that's everybody. It's a spectrum, obviously. Some people are less, but I definitely have made. I can't bring myself to make comments. Like, I rarely make a comment, but if I'm really bored and I'm just sitting there, sometimes I will make a comment if something really bothers me. Usually I try to make joke comments, right?
Yeah, me too.
But a couple of times I have, like, challenged somebody, like, that's terrible what you said, or whatever. That's an ugly thing, right? And it's like, it's so predictable. It's almost like, you know exactly what's coming back at you. It's going to be like, no, you're stupid because whatever, right? And it's like, well, but there is something that it fulfills in us, right? That we have this. It shows me that, like, a movie like this one, like Blonde, can't do well in today's climate because it's the kind of thing that we're putting all our energy towards shielding ourselves from.
Right.
And there's reasons for that, right? Because we live in a scary time, and it's a weird time, and there's a lot of change happening really quickly, and this just makes we feel insecure, right? As a society. And, the internet is just like humanity's unconscious, laid bare.
It's the lowest common denominator.
Yeah. But it's also got like again, like, you have to be nuanced about all this stuff. Like you were saying, the guy is a nice guy in real life, right? But, we don't know, none of us know anybody to their core.
No.
Especially
if we only see them on the internet.
Yeah, and we don't even know ourselves to the core, right? So, that's what I'm saying. There's just an awful lot of judgment and people saying all kinds of, like, thumbs down kind of behavior, when really we haven't earned the right to do that, right? Because we don't even know ourselves. Like, you don't know, again, like, who you really are. Like, life is a process of getting to know yourself. No,
right? I know, and it's like some 20-something person who's seen like 3 Marilyn Monroe movies suddenly thinks they're an expert and gets on, and starts railing about, personal attacks on Angie Dominic or Ana de Armas or anybody.
Yeah.
I mean, it blows my mind.
Yeah. And it's also like, you're just shitting on this beautiful performance. Like, her performance is amazing, considering she has an accent, and it comes through sometimes. Mm-hmm. You would think, that would kind of like ruin it, but it really doesn't. It adds to it because it makes her a kind of fake Marilyn. You know what I mean? It's like,
that's a good point, because I thought there were moments where I thought she was amazing, and other moments where I thought she was a little over the top, and. But she's a very good actor and all sorts of things.
She's
so
great. I think hers is the closest thing I've seen, because
it's probably the best Marilyn Monroe performance we've seen.
Yeah, it really. There are times when it's so uncanny. You're like, holy shit, she looks exactly like her. Yeah. Other times, not as much. It's even if it was
very chameleon-like.
Yeah, even if it wasn't sort of intentional, although I have a feeling it was, but
it probably was. It's a director with a lot of intelligence.
It's very intelligent, and all the different film stocks and the green, we get used to these things because MTV and like shorts on YouTube and short film people use style now, like that's from avant-garde films, but. We don't know how to. I think we're losing the ability to, like, actually. This scares me. It's like, well, we're losing the ability to actually focus. Like, does anybody like who watches a Tarkovsky film right now? You know what I mean? Like, who?
Well, this is like our talk about Jeanne Dielman, right?
Right.
Yeah.
I know, and it's like, but I guess we're wrong on some level, because that did become the best film of all time, right? So maybe, but I don't know. I sometimes I go, like, people don't have the patience for this, but maybe that's just being a little too general. Maybe there are, like.
Well, certainly there are.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
And maybe there are no. Yeah.
The movie going public is just so different than it was in the 1970s or early 80s, where
I wonder if a movie like this one, like Blonde, had come out like in the 90s or something. It would have been different.
I don't know. I mean, well, if it had come out in, like, say, 1978, that would have been like...
It might have been like a totally
It could have
huge,
box office.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Okay, so what else do we want to talk about now? I think we've kind of covered Blonde.
Yeah, we talked about Blonde a lot. I think we mentioned off the top the idea of separating the art from the artist. Mm-hmm. And I know this is a movie you haven't seen. In fact, nobody's really seen it. But I think it's a good point because it's Louis C.K.'s film that he directed called I Love You, Daddy.
Right.
And this came out in it didn't. It was supposed to come out in 2017.
Yeah.
And what happened was it played some film festivals where it got very good reviews, and then the allegations came out that Louis C.K. was exposing himself to his female stand-up comedy colleagues, and among other awful things.
Yeah.
He was denying it, but the allegations kept going, and then finally he admitted to it. And with all of that happened, the distributor of the film, The Orchard, canceled its. I think it was gonna screen at another festival, maybe New York. I can't remember. But they canceled that, and then they canceled the entire release of the film. Period.
Right.
And
you can't find it, right?
You can't find it because Louis C.K. bought the rights back.
Oh.
And
is he showing it on his channel or anything?
I don't think so.
Wow,
I don't think
weird.
so. And the only people who saw it were people who got Academy screeners because those had been shipped out.
Right.
DVDs. And I happened to see it because
lucky
through the acquisitions on our company, and we were looking at it. But what's interesting about we talked about Manhattan earlier. So I Love You, Daddy is about this guy whose teenage daughter is getting older. She's like 16 or 17 or so, becoming more independent, although they still have a very close relationship. But then she ends up dating an older filmmaker played by John Malkovich, who also has a reputation as a pedophile.
Right.
And he has to come to grips with that. She seems to be in this happy relationship with this guy, and how that's torturing him.
Right.
The film it's very much a Woody Allen homage.
Yeah.
C.K. is a big Woody Allen fan, and he talked a lot about how he's influenced by him in the black and white cinematography.
It looks like Manhattan. Like
it looks very much like.
I've seen a bunch of clips.
Yeah. And I thought it was a good film. I thought it was quite good. It has an ick factor, which really reflects Louis C.K.'s real life as being really icky.
Right.
But it's also very self-critical about why he has this issue, when his daughter is clearly happy.
Right.
His daughter is not portrayed as a dumb person. She's played by Chloe Grace Moretz.
Yeah.
She's very smart, very together. And it's an interesting film, but one that as a male viewer often makes you uncomfortable.
Right.
And I thought that was really interesting. And I think the problem, what really upset me about the Louis C.K. thing was, and I was a big fan of his, was that so much of his material was highly critical of toxic masculinity, had a very feminist undertone in celebrating, the mother of his children and the horrible ways that men treat women. And very critical of that, very self-critical of himself as a masculine figure in relationships and as a father. And his TV show Louis did the same thing.
Yeah.
It reflected all those things. And then for him to turn around and behave like this in real life was heartbreaking. And I felt the same way about Joss Whedon. Joss Whedon turned out to have been this horribly abusive person on film sets and TV shows. Specifically towards women, when he created one of the great feminist TV shows and characters of all time, Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
So I don't, and I hear that, but I also kind of feel like those things aren't mutually exclusive. It's like you can still that's the art, separating the artist from the art, right? It's like you can still have Buffy the Vampire Slayer. It's not his anymore.
No.
Right? Once the artist gives something, to society, like, put some art out there, you don't have to. It's throwing the baby out with the bathwater to like condemn the artist and
Well, nobody's condemned. I've never heard anybody condemn Buffy the Vampire Slayer at all. My point is only that I feel like
but people do that. Like, people will say, like when you cancel somebody, you cancel their back catalog too, right?
Right. Well, I've never heard anyone. True, but
Yeah.
I've never heard it in that specific case.
Right.
My problem. What I'm trying to say though about Louis C.K. and about Joss Whedon
Right.
is that their material, their art, was so feminist, and yet in their real lives, they behaved so abominably toward women.
Right.
That's the disconnect that really breaks my heart.
Yeah.
Is that how?
But then again, see, this is the problem. Like, for me, like, obviously the way the stories are told, it makes a lot of sense. But again, I don't know these guys. I don't know what they're like. I don't know. Like, again, like if you had a friend, right, a really close friend, and I'm not talking about myself, but a really close friend who you found out was exposing themselves in public parks and they got arrested, right? I mean, you would immediately think, not like, what a sexist asshole. You would think, what's wrong with you? Like, what's going on with you, right? And I'm sure you would find out that sometimes people can't help doing those things. They're compelled, right? I'm not suggesting that I know that that's the case with either of these cases, but
it certainly doesn't justify any behavior. But
well, in a way, it does. I mean, it depends what
it can explain it.
Yeah, I mean, it really depends on if you think you have free will. Well, I mean, it really depends, right? I mean, if okay, I don't want to get. This is a far tangent, so I'm not going to go into. But I will say that, like, I think we downplay how little control we actually have in who we are and how we. Like, people talk as if you could, like, you're an asshole. Change right now. It's like, well, fuck. If you think I'm an asshole, I'm done, because I'm not. How can I change? That's who I am, right? It's like, I think we have to expand understanding about how men might want to expose themselves in front of women for all kinds of different reasons that are maybe not even something they want to do. I doubt that they do, right? It's like that famous, I don't know, it's like, this is an extreme example, but I always think of it. It's like, there was a serial killer way back in the 70s. I can't remember which one it was, but there's a famous crime scene photo in a bedroom, like walls are covered with blood, just awful, right? But written in blood on the wall, it says, "Please catch me, I can't help myself." Right. And so that's an interesting thing. The person themselves sometimes, and oftentimes, I think, again, it's a spectrum, right? But oftentimes, we don't know why we do the things we do. No. So I just think it's a little rich sometimes how people are so quick to judge somebody because they pulled their dick out, okay? It's of course it's not okay, but have you even stopped to think, like, most people don't do that. There's probably a reason why. It's probably not something he's happy
and it doesn't
about.
make him someone we should just say, well, just pretend they never existed.
Yeah, like, why is it that puritanical? Like, it's like people do all kinds of stuff. Like, I'm sure if we comb through both of our lives, there's enough there to cancel the planet over, right?
Or any, I mean, look at it's Hollywood, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
like, that's the reason you go into it.
So many scumbag people.
Yeah.
Like, how do you pick and choose which ones you're gonna, like, say, okay, that's all right, but this isn't okay?
That's right. It's just ridiculous.
So and so, like, stole millions of dollars from that person in residuals that it didn't, but that's okay. But so and so.
Now that's interesting, right? Because part of me thinks. Because like, I'm a super lefty, right? So, like, I always think about things like this. It sounds a bit conspiratorial, but it's not. Okay, so really, the money classes that run our lives, right, in the Western world here, I think they stoke this kind of shit, this kind of greed. I'm 100% sure they do this. Like, they stoke it, psychologically manipulate us to start arguing about stuff like movies and Louis C.K. pulling his dick out. When we don't, like, who cares? Like, I don't care about Louis C.K.'s life. It's not like he killed somebody, right? Like, you know, and even people who kill people, we don't care. Let's be honest. Like,
Yeah.
you know, the next day we're back, you know, oh, 5 kids were murdered in the school. Okay, anyway, so what's for lunch, right? So we don't care, right, at all. This is all kind of, you know, manufactured, right? And if they can keep us distracted from, you know, the real problem, which is like, this is a really unfair system we live in, right? And there are a lot of people who are suffering for no reason. And if we could get to, if they know that if we get together as people, we can overthrow them. And so they throw these kind of like tidbits at us, like, that are ridiculous, right? But it works because they have an algorithm, they have, you know, $1 million ad campaigns, you know, they know that the power of media is persuasive. And
It's all the Illuminati, Azed. It's all the Illuminati.
Well, just the Jewish. Get it right, Tom.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
It's interesting. I posted on my Facebook page last week. There was someone, she snapped a photo. It was a selfie of Roman Polanski and his victim.
I saw that.
Yeah,
I saw that.
And, you know, she's been pretty vocal in the press for many years, for a very long time. She's been saying, leave me alone. I don't want to talk about this. And while you're at it, leave Roman alone. Because, like, this is a long time ago. Just forget it.
She said it didn't destroy me, you know, like, it's what
she's not defining herself by this kind of tragic, terrible thing that happened to her.
And she's nuanced because she says, yes, it was wrong, it was bad, it was, you know, whatever. But it's all about, are you going to carry this on your fucking through your entire life as your one thing, right? Like, why would you do that? You're suffering, like, you know, worse if you do that, right? So I know it's not like I'm saying, oh, just get over it. You know, I think her position is pretty unusual, right? Mm-hmm. But it does have a lesson in it. You know, that people are not going to react the same way to all kinds of traumas, right? And also, we're all full of trauma, right?
Well,
you know,
yeah. I mean, you know, there's also I could talk for like an hour about the traumatic things that have happened to me just in the last like 5 or 6 years.
Yes.
And you know,
I think that's our next podcast.
That's our next podcast. Yeah.
Tom's traumas.
Part 1, right. 1971 to 1975.
Still running after 10 years. Yeah.
But you know, I think my point was only that you know, that she pointed the finger back at the media.
Yes.
She said, you know, like you just made that long rambling, you know, psychopathic speech about how it's all tied in, blah blah blah. Right. But to your point,
right? So they got to you too, right? Is that press outlets are going to say, let's do stories about stuff like this instead of stories about what's happening in Ukraine or what's happening with this or what's happening with that, or even like you know what's really happening. Like there's like there's Bernie Sanders, right? He's saying the same thing for like 60 years, but there's very few voices out there that do that because and we know this. We're in this business, right? Like we're in the business. I'm a content creator, and you're a distributor, right? We are in the business of propaganda for the most part, right? Sure. But the reason why we give a shit about a movie like Blonde or even the Louis C.K. film, which I haven't seen, but I would like to, is movies that are good, like are interesting, whatever. They can actually take you out of that, that consumption train you're on, because they make you think, right? And we shouldn't reject. You shouldn't reject it because again, it makes you feel uncomfortable.
Well, what about this? What if you embraced it instead? Because what about the idea that if you've got a work created by somebody who is this troubled, this problematic, is there again not being able to separate the art from the artist necessarily? Can I look at this work and try to understand something about that person,
right.
or can I or can my knowledge of what that person has done inform the way I watch this movie.
Yeah.
So going back to Polanski, for example,
He's a genius. I'm sorry.
Of course he's a
yeah,
genius.
he's a genius. Like you can't not say that, right? So,
and when you think about his life, the way he grew up, his childhood, which was worse than anything
Holocaust
in the world.
survivor, yeah, exactly.
And then think about,
Sharon
something,
Tate, yeah, the whole
and
Manson,
then, exactly. But also think about something like Repulsion, and then Rosemary's Baby,
yeah,
and then what he did. There's almost like a through line.
There is a through line.
I
totally see that. Yeah,
and this through line of trauma and devastation and self-destruction.
Yeah, and other destruction. Yeah,
yeah.
That's where mental illness comes from, right? Or mental health problems come from trauma, right? Like, and to some degree or another, we're all traumatized. Like, again, some of us very mildly, maybe, but we walk around and we are, we're with our coworkers, we're with our friends, we're with our family, even our close family. We can never actually know the depth of somebody's pain the way they know it themselves. And it's very hard to explain to people, and people aren't listening anyway. That's why a movie like Blonde is kind of important, right? Because it allows you to convene with an area that you don't get to express that clearly. And so somebody's trying to express it in that way, and it kind of gets close to something, right? I think that's what the uncomfortable part, because we're getting more and more used to not doing that, right?
Right.
And it's terrible, because that's the only way you grow. You can't grow unless you admit to your dark side, your bad stuff, right?
And admit that other people have dark sides, and we need to sort of figure out why.
Yeah.
It goes back to we cannot treat these criminals like monsters, because
That's right.
if we treat them like monsters, that they become an other.
They're other.
They become something else.
It's like,
but they're human, like we are.
Yeah, it's like Sister Helen Prejean, right? Who was portrayed by Susan Sarandon, right? Dead Man Walking. I remember she said, I hate the crime, but I love the criminal, right? Like it's like, or I hate the behavior, but I love the person, right? I'm not getting it right, but it's something like that, right?
Well,
and it's like you have to understand that hating the person is just a deflection. It's a projection that you're putting onto that person, and that's what we always do. It's like what I was saying earlier. Our story is we have to make some figure out there. It's a scapegoat. We have to have a scapegoat, right? And that's becoming more and more apparent in our. You would think with all this technology and connection and stuff that we would be going the other way, but we're not. No. We're almost going super tribal, right?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. We're going very tribal.
And it's all about public disgrace. It's just a form of public scapegoating, right? Yeah. And that goes back before Jesus, right? Like it goes back to the beginning.
Hanging in the town square.
Yeah, hanging in exactly. But that story, that myth of, of just like tearing the person down to the point where you're killing them, right? In effigy, right? That's big for us.
I saw a talk that Andy Serkis did, the actor, at Fan Expo last year, or at Comic-Con earlier this year. And one of the
nerd.
Oh, yes, no, very nerdy. And he was talking about shows that he liked, and he said him and his wife loved the show Monster, the Jeffrey Dahmer show.
Oh, I never saw it.
And he said it was fascinating and really interesting to seek to understand why his father still loved him.
Yeah.
He said that.
Yeah.
I thought that was really interesting.
That is very interesting, yeah.
I didn't see the Jeffrey Dahmer show, but my son did. He loved it. And
yeah, I'm just scared to watch it.
Yeah, I'm scared to watch it.
Yeah, I'm scared. I don't want to, it's that thing, it's like, it's going to make me feel like shit now but you never know, it could be good. I
don't know. Ryan Murphy is very hit and miss, mostly miss. But,
that's true too. Yeah.
But
but getting back to Louis C.K. a little bit, his show Louis was great.
Great.
And he's a very talented guy. And I went to see him live, and
Me too.
And I found him not only to be funny, but very wise.
Yeah.
You know, he had some very wise takes, right? And I think it's ridiculous that because he had a personal flaw that made him do some very bad things, that means that we should just, he's banished from life. It's like, actually, I don't do that. I still watch clips of him he's hard to find, but I still watch clips and stuff. It's like,
are his shows still on Netflix? I don't know.
no, I don't think so.
Yeah.
But it's like, it's, I mean, we're not saying anything that radical here either. It's like everybody hates that this is happening. But I think, like, I really do think we should think about how Twitter and Facebook, they have a lot of control over us, because I spend so much time on my phone, and I'm not even like one of the worst ones, right?
And I think ultimately it comes down to a personal choice as well. Like you and I were talking about music before we started recording,
right?
And I mentioned how when a Michael Jackson song comes on the car radio, I change it because I don't like being reminded of what a horrible things he did.
Right.
And you don't, because you like the music and you are able to separate that.
There are some,
and then and then I mentioned that I have a harder time changing it when it's "Don't Stop Till You Get Enough,"
right?
Than if it's Thriller or Beat It.
Yeah,
it's such a great song.
I agree with you there. Like, if it's Billie Jean, I can change right away, right?
Right.
But if it's like, I want to be starting something, that's hard to change.
Yeah,
and
that
don't stop till don't stop till you get enough.
But I think it's all comes down. So, like, going back to Polanski though, right? Like it's let's say, so I remember. So one of the things that we talked about was how, like, the movie Tar kind of set off some thinking about this. And in Tar, there's a great scene where near the beginning, where she's teaching a class, and the student doesn't want to talk about all the old white.
Well, he doesn't want to play Beethoven.
Doesn't want to play, yeah. And it struck me like, if you're a film student at a film school, and you say to yourself, well, I'm just not going to watch anything by that scumbag Polanski.
You're done. Yeah. Like,
I mean, you are depriving. Who are you hurting? You're not hurting Polanski. You're not. You're not yourself. Making a mess. You're not. It's not a statement you're making to anybody except maybe your immediate circle.
Yeah. It's virtue signaling to yourself in a way,
and
it's a way to make yourself feel good. And this is the thing.
But more harmfully, you're depriving yourself of the joy of some of the greatest films ever made.
Yeah,
and
the lessons of those films. Like, I think this is something that we both probably agree with. Like, in many ways, the vast, just the kind of like the vastness of our film watching, right? And, exploring into different cultures and different types of cinema. I've learned a lot about life through films.
Sure.
There are some really profound, like something like Ugetsu or an Ozu film or a Bresson film or Dreyer, all those guys, right? Or, I don't know, Bergman, whatever. You watch these movies, they have the profundity of like a philosophical theory sometimes, right? They're not merely like Solaris. Like, I think about Solaris all the time, all the fucking time, right?
Yeah.
Because it's such a deep. There are questions in that movie and images that go with those questions, right? That they're not merely entertainment. They're not just something I'm consuming. They fill me up in a way that is nutritional, right? Sorry to use all this food imagery. I guess I'm hungry.
I have snacks.
Well, did you not get snacks earlier? The other thing about, what we're talking about today, like with all these films that are being kind of censored, is the way, like, this now is going back in history and going back into the archives and basically digging up dead bodies and re-killing them, right? And like I think one of the ones that me and you probably both enjoy, even though we realize there are problems with it, is something like Gone with the Wind, right?
Right.
So first of all, I don't think Gone with the Wind is one of the greatest movies ever made.
No.
But it's a really good movie. It's a well-made movie, and it's a fun movie to watch, right? Now, is that worth, whatever? I think it is, personally, because I also think, like, a movie like Gone with the Wind is, like, it was never that, I don't know, for me anyway, I mean, it was never about the politics of it when I was watching it as a kid, for example, or as a teenager, right?
Right.
It was like, oh, it's like a love story during wartime, whatever. It's like, in a way, what works about it is the Scarlet character, right? And, yes, there's all this backdrop of horrible, Southern Civil War stuff, and slavery and all that stuff. But that didn't seem to me to be the kind of, like, major thing. Now, I understand it's offensive, but it's also, like, there's some really great things about that movie, like just some beautiful set pieces. It's just directed well. The acting is really good. I don't know.
Yeah, I think one of the things that Turner Classic Movies started doing was putting like
a disclaimer
in front, which I think makes sense, and I think that's smart. And they're doing that for a number of films. A lot of westerns, John Ford westerns that have, a lot of that are quite racist, like The Searchers, for example. Which is complicated.
That's a complicated one.
It's very complicated
because it's about what it's actually doing.
But Gone with the Wind, I mean, it's definitely offensive material in the portrayal of basically the two Mammy characters most.
Well, I don't even. So I've heard different things. It's more it's not that the characterizations are offensive necessarily. No. It's the lie that's being told, right?
So you're right. I don't think there's nothing. The depictions are very good. I mean, the performances by Hattie McDaniel, who won an Oscar, and Butterfly McQueen are excellent. But I guess, as you're saying, it was just sort of.
It was just that. I think what people got most upset about, and I agree with this 100%, is the fictionalizing of the way black-white relations are in the film.
Mm-hmm.
Like. They're like all the white people are really quite nice to the black slaves, right? And they, they treat them like little children, but they love them too, and they take care of them, and and the black people are willing to die for their master. It's that element, right? That is problematic. If you look at the actual portrayals, like Mammy is a very, she's a very strong character.
Yeah.
She's like outspoken.
She doesn't take no guff from Scarlet.
And she's really the central figure in that family, right? In many ways. I mean, she's largely. There are obviously big problems with that portrayal too, but sometimes I think it's better. Like the interesting thing about movies like that one, or even movies with blackface and stuff like that, right? Like. The interesting thing is, if you just ban them, you don't actually get to engage with the racism anymore. You don't get to engage with the ideas of, oh shit, that's how people used to treat black people in America.
Yeah, you can't just erase the history.
Yeah, if you erase it, then you're letting it happen again, right? Yeah. Because there's nothing to go on anymore, right? You don't see what people did.
You're not learning.
Yeah, and I'll say this too, we're complicated enough as human beings that we can watch a movie for its entertainment value while also not condoning some of the portrayals and things that are in it, right?
Yeah.
Like, sorry, one doesn't necessarily have to cancel out the other, right? Like, I watched a lot of terrible movies, and I'm not talking about porn, but, like, yeah, John Ford, like, he was a right-wing asshole, right?
Yeah.
John Wayne was a total
John Wayne was
asshole.
Even worse.
Yeah. But some of those movies are so fucking brilliant. It's like a fact. You can't deny that you're going to watch. Like, if I went home right now and, My Darling Clementine was on, I would watch it,
Yeah.
Like, I would watch that movie because it's so good, right? Or Stagecoach or whatever, right? But that's my favorite, My Darling.
Stagecoach?
No, My Darling Clementine.
Oh, My Darling Clementine.
I love that one. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a beautiful,
the relationship,
beautiful film.
between Doc Holliday and Wyatt Earp is...
Yeah. But one with John Wayne that I think is really beautiful too is The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance.
Oh, so great.
Yeah.
Great.
I mean, you can't... I mean,
Yeah.
can you... I don't want to live in a world where those movies don't exist.
That's a big part of
and
this,
that's
right?
the hard thing, right?
Yeah.
Now, and something like The Searchers, that could be a whole other episode on itself.
Yeah.
But, my problem, I love The Searchers. It's an incredible film.
So good.
So great on so many levels. There's one particular scene. The film is avowedly anti-racist. That's the message of it. And yet there are racist portrayals,
of course,
in the film, including one terrible one with a quote-unquote squaw,
right,
who is treated so badly and for laughs. It's just so hard to watch.
That is the worst part of that movie.
It's
You're right.
Easily the worst part of the film.
That part has always bothered me too.
It's very bothersome.
And it's also because even, not Ethan, but
Martin.
Martin, it's Martin who, like, kicks her, away and stuff like that, right? And it's just, it's like, ugh, it's an ugly scene.
And the Martin character is
brown face.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's Jeffrey Hunter in brown face, but his character is...
He's great. I love the character.
Yeah, his character is half indigenous.
Right.
And yet he's so offended at the idea of being with this woman.
Right.
That, he kicks her down the hill.
Yeah, and I think that element of the humor, sometimes it's got that kind of male humor that's really aggressive, right? That kind of thing, he doesn't know how to do that, John Ford. But, okay, you take that one scene out, the rest of the movie is pretty amazing.
Well, it's like I was reading about Breakfast at Tiffany's and how there have been so many people who are like, I love this movie.
Right.
Except for just take out the Mickey Rooney parts. Yeah. And otherwise, it's like a great classic Audrey Hepburn rom-com.
But see, here's the thing. Okay, here's the thing. Maybe we can end on this because it's a question, right? Mickey Rooney, you cannot deny that is one of the most ridiculous and over-the-top parodies or whatever of a Chinese guy.
Japanese guy.
A Japanese guy, sorry. With the big teeth and the whole
awful.
thing. It's awful, right?
It's like the old racist Bugs Bunnies. Yeah,
but here's my question, right? Is it more important? It's a complicated question. Is the representation everything, right? So I'm wondering what's the intent, right? Like, maybe people say it doesn't matter, right? It's just offensive. Granted, you can take that position. But for me, I'm wondering, do I think that the producers, directors, the writers, Mickey Rooney, everybody, their intent was to insult Asian people? I don't think so. I don't think it's about insult.
I don't think so either.
I think it's about laughing at other cultures, but also saying you could laugh at us because laughing at each other is better than killing each other, right? That's what I think that is behind that.
So I was reading about the film, and apparently the producer of Breakfast at Tiffany's wanted to hire a Japanese actor for that role. Blake Edwards was very adamant that he wanted Mickey Rooney. Producer thought that would be a big mistake. Blake Edwards won, because at the time he was a big film director. Right. And Blake Edwards, many, many years later, said, I regret that decision completely. Right. I wish I'd never done that. I feel terrible.
Right.
Mickey Rooney said years later that at the time he had no idea that this was offensive. If he had realized that, he would never have done it.
Right.
But he also said that in the years following Breakfast at Tiffany's, there were so many Japanese and Asian Americans who came up to him and said how much they loved him in the film and thought he was hilarious and was bang on, and it was great. Mm-hmm. So it becomes very, very complicated.
Well, it just a personal story from my childhood. One night when I was maybe like 8 or 9 years old, my sister would be like 10 or 11. I was awakened You know, you go to bed at that age. You go to bed at around 9 o'clock, right? I was awakened by the sound of my mother laughing, like loud laughing, went all the way up the stairs. Me and my sister both came out of our rooms, and then we said, Mom, what's going on? And she said, you have to come down, you have to come down. So it was a school night, right? But she said, come on down. And we sat, I remember we curled up with her. We were little, so we curled up with her on the couch. You know, I was on top, and Lindsay was, you know, she was hugging her. And the movie that she was laughing that hard at, and we were watching, was The Party.
Right.
Right? And she just couldn't get, she said, he's perfect, right? Like, and the thing is, that's true. Like, this is mostly white guilt that causes a lot of this. I mean, obviously people of color having some problems with these portrayals, I get it, right? But, you know, I just know that, you know, we used to laugh more at each other, right? And I think it was okay because it's acknowledging the difference and the otherness, which it's still coming into our minds. It's still, like when we see somebody from a different culture, it's not as if we're all so enlightened that it doesn't even cross our minds. Oh, this is a person who looks Asian, or this is a person who's black, right? Or this is a person who's brown, or whatever. It does, right? Yeah. I mean, of course it does, because our brains have to decode whatever, you know,
nobody's
information.
colorblind.
Nobody's colorblind, and that information is going in there, right? So, you know, my point is that, you know, otherness is something that can be either terrifying or it can be something that you welcome, right? You know, where you welcome the other. You know, the stranger is somebody that you help out and, you know, you're hospitable towards, right? Or the stranger is going to kill you, right? And everybody's out to get you. I just don't want to live in that world, right? Where there's an unhealthy fear of the other, and, you know, taking it also seriously sometimes is a problem, because all races, when we get together in our inner circles, we all talk about ourselves, our cultural traits, you know, other cultures and their traits. You know, it's more about the public show of, you know, we're good folks, we don't do that, right? Now, I think I'll just say this, the last thing I'll say, I'm not saying that good things are not coming out of pushing, right? Yeah. We should push everybody, you know, yes, because there are real societal problems that are caused by unconscious bias. I believe in all of that stuff, right? But pushing to the point where you cannot dress up as the other, I think is a problem, right? Like, I think that's how we, you know, what do they say? Like, parody is the
sincerest form of
flattery, yeah. And there isn't. It's all about now teasing out when you see an older portrayal in Gone with the Wind or whatever, right? It's not enough to just say, "Oh, black person, slavery, bad," you know, burn the film. You have to look at the portrayal in its context and say, "But is this a somewhat progressive attempt to show the humanity of these characters in the context of the historical period," right? Like, that's why there are some, like, me and Tina were talking about, it's not a movie, but Jack Benny show, right? And there he had his manservant, right? Rochester, right? Thing is, Rochester ruled that show. It was his show, right? Like, you know, he was actually the one who was funny, and he was always defiant and whatever. It was a portrayal of a character in society that people had come to see as silent and without any agency or whatever. And that portrayal took it to another level, right? It's all incremental that way, right? Yeah. Anyway, that's the last thing I'll say. It's all incremental.
Beautiful. Well, at 94 minutes, are we...
I think we should make this podcast like the Joe Rogan show, like just 4 hours, 5 hours.
Is it 4 hours? Is the Joe Rogan show 4 or 5 hours?
Some of them are 4 hours. Yeah.
Holy fuck! Yeah, I had no idea.
Yeah, people love that. They listen to him for 4 hours.
Jesus Christ, that explains the world right there.
And on that note. Okay. See you
Okay.
next time.